So we all know of a certain web-slinging superhero that has become one of the most iconic characters in all of popular culture. Ever since the debut of Stan Lee's Spider-Man in August of 1962, it feels like the character has never left the cultural zeitgeist. From comics to cartoons to box office blockbusters, Spider-Man's had over 60 years of success, but you might not know that 20 years before he debuted, the comic world had another spider-themed superhero that bore several similarities. Say hello to plain Shannon Kane, one of the Golden Age's few leading ladies. Tucked away in the back of The Eagle, a short-lived 1941 comic book by Fox Feature Syndicate. No relation. Like most comics, The Eagle was an anthology. You'd open it up each month and find several different short stories featuring an ever-changing lineup of characters, with the less popular ones often relegated to the back end of the book. Flip all the way to the back of their September issue and you'd happen upon Shannon's story, The Spider Queen. Surprisingly, her backstory has nothing to do with radioactive spider bites. She doesn't even really have any superpowers to speak of. Instead, Shannon worked as the wife and close assistant of the brilliant Dr. Harry Kane, a government chemist on special assignment. One day, enemies of the state sneak into Harry's office and assassinate him, stealing important government documents. Dejected, Shannon looks through her late husband's records and finds a secret formula for super strong spiderweb fluid, and she decides to carry on his work, creating a special set of web-shooting bracelets that allow her to stick on and swing from walls. Before long, Shannon has developed her alter ego, the Spider Queen, and swings around the cityscape fighting crime. Any of this ringing a bell? So Spider Queen only lasted for count 'em, 3 issues. The first episode, besides setting up her origin story, follows her as she attempts to break up a bank robbery. After she makes short work of the clumsy criminals, an absent-minded young detective named Mike O'Bell happens upon the scene and makes the necessary arrests. After examining the crime scene, he finds a bunch of spent webs everywhere and quickly realizes that the Spider Queen was the one that took the crooks down. He then brings their bag of stolen money back to the police station to log as evidence, handing it straight away to the chief of police and filing his report before calling it a day. But wanting to make sure that the money was safely returned, Shannon swings over to the station and hangs around outside the building to discover that the police chief himself is in on the heist. Knowing that she'll need Mike's help to bring the chief down, the Spider Queen steps out of her costume and orchestrates a meet-cute as cute and fluffy Shannon Kane, taking O'Bell back to her apartment for coffee. This results in a brief gag where Shannon leaves the room, throws on her costume, heads outside, quickly swings over to the other window of her apartment to give Mike a clue about his boss, before then leaping back out of the window to swing back into the kitchen, change out of her costume, and then walk back into the room as Shannon, as if nothing had even happened. This would have killed as a 60s superhero sitcom. So working off the tip, O'Bell catches the police chief in the very act, and as the day is saved, O'Bell earns a promotion, and the public is none the wiser as to the Spider Queen's secret identity. All in all, an okay debut, but the second story is even better. So there's this vicious mob running the streets, torturing, kidnapping, shaking up local businesses for protection money, the usual. Shannon's investigating a particular shop that she suspects has been taken over by the mob after she thinks that she hears the sound of the owner being tortured in the back room. She leaves to change into her costume, but runs into Mike O'Bell on the street, who also happens to be on the case. Shannon fakes a headache to get out of the conversation, and quickly throws on her Spider Queen threads, hoping to beat O'Bell to the punch. The two then bump heads again in the basement of the shop, and O'Bell, now suspecting that the Spider Queen is actually behind the kidnapping, moves to arrest her. This results in a hilarious scuffle where O'Bell is accidentally knocked unconscious, forcing Shannon to distract the mobsters to draw them away from his body. The detective then wakes up and leaves the shop safely. He supposes that his reputation as a cop is keeping folks from talking to him, so he gets the bright idea to ask his gal pal, Shannon, to help him get information from other shop owners. More than happy to do so, plain Jane Shannon Kane agrees to go to a stationery shop shop next door to ask around about the missing owner. Of course, instead, she throws on her costume and busts in demanding information. She finds out that the owner has been taken to a nearby lake and heads back to relay the information to Mike. He speeds off to the location, worried that soon the shop owner will be sleeping with the fishes. This gives Shannon the opportunity to change back into the Spider Queen and help him in the rescue. After a job well done, Shannon reappears to Mike in plain clothes, offering him a ride home, and to allay suspicion about how she's always showing up at just the right time, Shannon claims that the Spider Queen dropped her a line, knowing that she and Obel are more than a little friendly, and the detective totally buys it. This Mike Obel fella, he's not that bright. So the Spider Queen's third adventure is a much darker tone than the first two, and introduces a major antagonist for our heroine named the Noose. So the story starts with Shannon actually being stood up on a date by Mike Obel because a vicious serial killer, the Noose, so called due to his weapon of choice, has escaped from prison, and Obel is on the hunt. With her night totally spoiled, Shannon decides to catch the killer herself. So she figures that the Noose's first act once out of jail will simply be to get revenge on the local judge that sentenced him in the first place. This hunch proves right on the money. Shannon arrives at the judge's house and thwarts the attempted murder. Not wanting to be seen too closely in her costume by Mike, she calls the police, ties the Noose up, and leaves him at the scene of the crime for them to pick up. This proves a disastrous mistake. By the time Obel arrives, the Noose has cut himself free, and the next day, the police find the body of a young woman hanging outside of their station, with a note from the Noose claiming that he has killed the Spider Queen. Obel is stunned, and back home in her apartment listening to the news report on the radio, so is Shannon. She rushes to the local morgue and demands to see the Spider Queen's body, and finds, to her horror, her next-door neighbor. The Noose followed Shannon home, mistook the neighbor for her, and inadvertently killed the wrong person. Incensed, Shannon leaves the morgue, dons her Spider Queen outfit, and heads out to get revenge. She tracks the Noose down to an old barn, and once inside, the two face off. During the scuffle, Shannon steps on a loose floorboard, and the Noose briefly gains the upper hand. Just as the rope is thrown around her neck, Mike Obel appears to save the day. And together, the two overpower the Noose and arrest him once and for all. The Spider Queen makes her great escape, and the story ends with Shannon and Mike finally heading out for a date. The last panel promises another exciting Spider Queen adventure in the next issue, but as fate would have it, that comic never arrived. Fox Features' The Eagle was short-lived, and Spider Queen, already relegated to the back end of the magazine, quickly faded into obscurity. In my estimation, the Spider Queen never clicked with audiences because she was never really given a fair shot to begin with. She was stuck into a comic that itself was targeted to a demographic likely uninterested in a superheroine story. To add insult to injury, her character was never physically featured on any of the comic covers, apart from a brief mention on corner text boxes, so any young girls that were skimming the comics rack probably never even noticed that she existed. After her brief stint in The Eagle, the character was abandoned and fell into the public domain, and yet, almost 20 years later, Stan Lee's Spider-Man character, containing several similar concepts, hit shelves and became an almost overnight success. That doesn't seem fair. Now, it remains unclear whether Lee lifted any mechanical inspiration from the Spider Queen story, but in a strange twist of fate, Marvel Comics would actually revive Shannon herself, adapting the now public domain story for their own continuity. In their iteration, Shannon is reimagined as a villain, acting as a killer for hire, and she even has a run-in with the Avengers at one point. But maybe you're like me and thinking to yourself, no way, let Shannon have a fair shake as a hero. Well, my friend, you're in luck, because that is exactly what I have done. She's in the public domain, so I can make my own iteration of the source material. And I have done so by writing a novel with an expanded origin story that is available now. You can purchase it by following the link in the description, and if you want to check out the first chapter for free, have at it. Hey, at the very least, if you're a fan of the famous web-slinger, you can pay homage to the character that did it first. This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website. Got a creation to show off or a business idea that you want to bring to life? They've got everything that you need to get started. Start with one of their best-in-class website templates and then use their new Fluid engine to customize it just how you like it. Use member areas to host exclusive video content. And if you've got something to sell, their online storefront makes it easy. Head to squarespace.com to start a free trial today. Give it a shot if you like the experience, and I think you will. Then when you're ready to launch your site in full, head over to squarespace.com/AustinMcConnell to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.